You're listening to CreepGeeks Podcast. So it begins again. Welcome back to CreepGeeks Podcast. This is Season 7, Episode 260.
Death in the Smokies, Paranormal Rangers.
That's right. So anyway, with Season 7, we decided to pick a new intro. I hope you liked it. If you don't, let us know. If you do, let us know. If you don't care, don't do anything. Because, see, you have choices here at the CreepGeeks Podcast.
And one of those choices is to give us a call. That phone number is going to be 575-208-4025.
That's right.
Yeah, or you can hit the Contact Us form on our website, CreepGeeks.com. Just tell us what you think of the new intro.
Yes.
Or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Just tell us something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm Greg.
I'm Omi.
And this is CreepGeeks Podcast. And this particular episode has lots of fun stuff for us to talk about because we have some experience with the subject matter. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Talking to you. You're just like not even looking at me.
No, I'm
eye contact.
agreeing with you. Eye contact? How am I supposed to look at the notes?
Yeah. It was a statement that you could derive from the past. In your notes, everything in the past. I feel like I've lost time sitting here trying to record this podcast episode.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that does get talked about in the podcast, the particular episode that we're about to do for you. Anyway, so the gist of the podcast is this. We talk about stuff we find to be interesting, and we hope you do too. Typically paranormal, UFO, Bigfoot, cryptids, if you will, weird stuff we've experienced. And this particular episode and this subject matter kind of ties into everything that we've had experience with in the past that led us to start doing this podcast in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've been listening for a while, all of this stuff we're about to tell you is pretty much what you've already heard. It's just going to be better. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Got to keep them in. No, because a little quick backstory for us, we started going out and taking pictures and doing things because we were primarily photographers out there on the weekend, going to these wild and wonderful places in New Mexico, right? Because New Mexico has its own New Mexico strangeness, if you will. And what we realized after getting back from our little adventures, you know, that things that we seen and places that we went and some of the stuff that we experienced is just kind of weird in a way that made us go, huh.
And some of the people I met at some of the different jobs I worked the same way. So, like years later, I'm like, huh, that person is on TV now.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, huh. But see, at the time, we weren't smart enough to figure out that we were actually having experiences. We just chalked it up as being in a strange place because New Mexico has its own flavor.
Or, going along with that weird flavor, at one point you felt we had the darndest luck trying to go on vacations.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. Instead, we should have just accepted the weird for what it was.
Yeah.
So.
You know, sometimes you get signs you shouldn't do things. And then you're like, I'm just going to persevere. And then you're like, wow, that ended badly. I should have just listened. So it is what it is. Anyway, this particular episode is kind of good for us because it does talk about the Paranormal Rangers.
Yeah. And
the Paranormal Rangers recently have resurfaced on Unsolved Mysteries.
On Netflix.
On Netflix, Season 3, I believe. Episode, whatever it is, 4, 3? It's Season 2? I don't know. It's on Netflix.
Season 3, Episode 5, I believe.
All right. There you go. I had that correct.
And it's funny because the overwhelming opinion from a lot of people in the cryptid and Bigfoot and paranormal community is it took them till Season 3 to kind of get back into it.
That's one person that had that opinion. I had that opinion as well. That's why I stopped watching. But just to kind of give you an idea why it took them so long to get to the point of doing interesting things that, you know, I find to be interesting at least. Kind of like what subject matter of this podcast, talk about paranormal stuff, weird stuff, spooky stuff, that kind of thing. Here's a comment. Right? Mm-hmm. The writing and direction for this modern take on unsolved mysteries is just confusing to me. First, the ghost episode from previous episodes revolved around tsunami ghosts, a phenomenon that would be completely alien to 99% of humanity. And now this one revolves around Navajo Ghost Rangers. come on, if this series is failing from a ratings perspective, it's because it keeps telling stories that no regular people can relate to.
Are you?
The original series told stories of haunted houses, regular people from the Midwest being terrorized, and some of those stories were really, truly creepy. And my thought, and the reason why I put this in here, and just to give you an idea, it has 6 thumbs downs, and this is on IMDb.
I'm so angry.
Is because you are the reason we have to sit through these garbage episodes to get to a good episode.
You, sir, or ma'am, I'm about to go give you your 7th thumbs down. How? How insulting.
Well, and that was kind of like, I'm like, the original series told stories of haunted houses, regular people from the Midwest being terror. Who cares about that? Well, 99% of the people out there, to quote her, I'm assuming it's a her. I don't know why. I just get the feeling it's female.
Let's not be as bad as Karen or Doug.
I wasn't going to mention any names. Now we have to delete the podcast.
You said he or she, but let's not be as bad as them. I'm sure Midwestern people have their own very terrifying hauntings and paranormal culture.
Well,
but to exclude, like the Tsunami Ghost episode, I actually watched that. I was like kind of moved by it.
Sure.
And there's been a couple of other episodes till season 3 where I'm like, wow, that was really thought-provoking, you know? To just say, to keep in a specific niche of like very narrow cultural
it's
awareness.
Gatekeeping.
It yes. I didn't want to say paranormal gatekeeping, but paranormal gatekeeping. It really is.
Well, and here's the thing too.
Exclusionary.
Well, yeah, but I mean, here's how I looked at it too. This person is unaware.
And
that there are a large quantity of people that are completely familiar with the Paranormal Rangers, Ancient Aliens, and everything else that this person does not watch. This is a true crime murder person who got all hung up over the idea that Unsolved Mysteries is doing more than just murder mysteries. Now, I'm not a true crime guy. I mean, it's neat for about 10 minutes, and then after that, it just becomes hearing about terrible things that have been done to real people.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, if I want that, I'll just watch like CSI on TV or something. I really don't want to go and get drugged through everything, and I just don't want it. I mean, I understand it's real, and a lot of people can really relate to that sort of thing. I like the idea of UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, and all that stuff because there's an idea or a possibility that it may be true or it may not be true.
Yes, and also...
and some of these shows are just super terrible.
By not hopping on a platform, except for what you just said... by not hopping on a platform and berating people who enjoy murder podcasts.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you haven't. So it's like, shh, let people enjoy things. Also, you just let the entire internet know, Karen, how...
Stop using Karen. That's, I mean, no, we're not going to do that.
It's like, that person just was like, I don't know.
I know. Let's not get worked up over this. We're just going to call them stupid. We're not going to get done.
You're like, don't say something, and then you say.
Yes, I was setting you up. I just didn't like. I had to put it in here. I don't normally tag like IMDb for anything, you know. But this stupid comment, you know. Anyway, I'm like, you missed the point. I thought this was a great episode that came on TV, Netflix, if you will. I'm old school on the television, right?
Yeah.
Because we're familiar with it. We actually had a chance to be there to see these guys talk and talk to them after their presentation at the New Mexico Paranormal UFO Forum, I think. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. We actually went there. We seen them talk. They gave us, an idea of what they're all about and what they were doing and how they were doing it. But more importantly, afterwards, when they were breaking down to box up all their stuff, and head home, we stood around and talked to them for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
30 minutes. And, and they had one rule that I kept trying to break, but they were pretty quick. And I was trying to touch stuff, right? And they were pretty serious about, don't touch that, don't touch that. And then, I think it was, because there's 2 people. You got Stanley and you got Jonathan, right?
Yeah.
And Jonathan was like, stop trying to touch that. I know you're trying to touch that. And I was just like, I just want to touch that, Because they have stuff out there, and all of it could, be bad. Anyway, I don't want to go into attachments and things like that. That's not what it's about. So we went there and we seen them talk, had a great time. We did record a little bit of audio because we got permission. And they said, sure, you can record a little bit, but don't record the whole thing. And we were like, of course. And I grabbed a couple minutes of audio. We'll play a little bit later. But it was good. And then the reason why it was good is because these guys have a set of criteria, right, that they had to meet because they were actual investigators, as in real life, Navajo Rangers that are recognized by the federal government as being federal agents because they trained in Georgia.
Yeah.
With everything from protection to asset protection to terroristic threats to biological, so these are not somebody that's, hey, I'm a paranormal investigator and these guys.
They met on the same SWAT team. That's how they met.
Yeah, they're co-commanders for SWAT. So these guys are for real. And this is a real police organization investigating this stuff for real.
Yeah.
And they do it on a reservation for the Navajo Nation, which is like over 20,000 square miles. It's as big as West Virginia, right? Which I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. And it expands over basically 3 of the 4 corner states, because I didn't see where it reached into Utah at all, which I thought was kind of odd. But anyway, so these are real cops. And the reason why they were able to investigate this sort of thing and do this sort of thing is because they don't have to adhere to the federal government rules. They're a reservation. They're a sovereign nation. They can do whatever they want within the confines of what they're allowed to do. They have their own police force. Yeah. Federal cops have no jurisdiction there unless they're actually called in.
Yeah, unless they're called in, FBI and cops have limited jurisdiction.
They have to go through tribal before they can. So anyway,
one of the things that they said when we listened to them talk, and I don't remember if it got recorded, was Jonathan said something about how, going on shift, it would take him like X amount of hours to get to work. But imagine your entire area that you patrol is the size of one small, like, northeastern state. So during his entire shift, he's covering like hundreds of miles and anything from paranormal to everyday stuff.
They're responsible for hundreds of miles. They don't always patrol 100. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. But more importantly, they're real cops, real federal agents, they're not some getting paid by the government kind of, and it's just like if a cop showed up to your house and investigated something.
Yeah.
Take notes, make reports, documents, follow the chain of evidence, follow the trail of evidence, all that stuff. Actually investigate and be able to send off things to have it, like forensic examinations and things like. So they had all the same sort of ability that a federal police officer had. They had these resources at their command that most people will never have the opportunity or the ability to use. Mm-hmm. And it was taken seriously. So, for example, if you sent off a sample of Bigfoot hair to a forensic pathologist or whatever to be investigated compared to a DNA database, it's not like, oh, this is garbage, I don't want to get to the whatever, this is some hokey thing. It's like, no, this is part of an actual investigation. You have to do your due diligence. You're responsible to make sure that the evidence, the sample, all of that stuff meets all the criteria for anything that gets gathered and brought forward to be able to be used in a court of law.
Yeah.
That sets a standard and expectation for anything that occurs out of this investigation that blows every freaking body else away in any of the paranormal or everybody out there in the paranormal world, period. Mm-hmm. This is like the FBI showing up and investigating stuff and taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And it's not getting pushed away and lost and everything's getting shuffled off somewhere because these guys are their own thing, their own nation, their own set of rules, their own laws, but they're federally recognized. So I place them on a pedestal way higher than anyone else when it comes to doing actual investigations because they had to investigate.
Yeah, because wasn't that part of it that they had to go out again and go investigate a Bigfoot complaint that may have been not handled with care.
Well, the story that was told us was a lady called because something was throwing rocks at her house.
Yeah.
And these were like big softball-sized rocks.
Yeah.
And she said that, they were throwing rocks and running around her place. So 2 cops showed up, and the lady had said, effectively to a description that it was like Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. And they were laughing and joking and making fun of her, not really doing the job. She got mad and called the chief, the tribal, right? Yeah. The tribal chief ranger.
Yeah.
And she was pretty, fired up about it. So evidently when, auntie or grandma called up there and started trashing on him, he decided to make it serious.
Yeah.
So the way the story goes, and I did notice with Netflix, a lot of things that we had heard are slightly different, but, he put 2 of his best people on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you want that. These are senior officers, and they're not out there to, they're not young and stupid.
Yeah.
They're serious. They're going to take it serious. They're more professional. They've been in the job longer. They know that, working with people is just as important as working with the evidence.
And that's part of it, too. Jonathan had been with the agency for a bit, so he had not only just that seniority, but just that level of maturity that comes with doing.
Yeah, he's like a lieutenant.
So. And I think it's even said in Netflix, the younger generation doesn't have the same cultural holdbacks that the other generation. So the younger cops that may have gotten set out, they may not have realized, people take this seriously, So, yeah. Well,
I think regardless of, they just were blowing it off, I think is really what it boiled down to. So, so these guys were tasked to go out and investigate, and they got handed the top cases.
Yeah.
And so they did. They went out and they did their thing. And, during the presentation that we watched and some of the things that they talked about with Netflix, the majority was the same sort of thing, although there were some details that were left out. Yeah. Probably that's because of, actually, now I think about a lot of details were left out, and it's probably for interest of time or whatever, or creative editing or whatever, because, they're trying to make an interesting show. And we were there when we seen the little presentation with these guys, and after we talked to them, it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And, the segment it was like 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever on Netflix. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So we had the opportunity to see them. We also had the opportunity to talk about them. And we've talked about them in previous podcast episodes. And then I was excited when you said that somebody, tagged us on Facebook and was like, hey, look, they're doing Paranormal Rangers.
Yeah.
Because we had went and seen these guys in 2000, I think it's 17. Yeah.
Was it?
2017.
No, it was 2018.
No, I'm pretty sure it was not 2018. It was 2017.
Okay.
Anyway, doesn't matter. It was a long time before this, right? And what I've noticed is that some people have heard of the Paranormal Rangers, some people haven't. And it seems like if you get towards the big paranormal weird events, dealing around things like Skinwalker Ranch and Phoenix Lights and the stuff that happened out in the Southwest, there's going to be some reference to the Paranormal Rangers, whether it's, Jonathan Dover doing an interview in the show or being part of the show or being in a clip or whatever, or showing their clips or making mention of it. So these events that they participated in, their investigations and just being in that area, made it to pull it. They were tapped in, man, and that just everything that we've talked about, on the podcast from our experiences out there, these guys are kind of related to it in one way or another. And let me tie that in with this. When we would go camping in a place in Jimenez, right, in recreation area, you have the San Juan Rivers up there and Valley Calderas, things like that, which is where they filmed Longmire, if you ever seen that Western Adventure, and where they filmed episodes of Finding Bigfoot. We had experiences out there where we were camping one time and, had rocks thrown at us and noises and, people hooping and hollering and running through the woods and all that stuff. And then afterwards we find out that there was nobody camping there. It was just us in that area. There wasn't people running through the brush on ATVs yelling and screaming and those big rocks that were by the van. And, who threw those? Mm-hmm. I don't know. We seen some things and me and Ben, the dog, were sitting there looking at a jagged tree stump all night. Tree stump was gone the next day. So anyway, Oh, talking to the ranger at the hot springs who was like, dude, I would never camp where you guys go. I won't go there at night by myself. Don't go to these particular areas. And then fast forward 5 years later, they're doing episodes on finding Bigfoot about people having experiences in exactly the same area. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Kind of crazy, right? And then we watched this episode of the Paranormal Rangers on Netflix, and they're showing their investigations where they went and investigated Bigfoot sighting by at least 30 people along the San Juan River. They didn't say where exactly, but they showed footage of their own because they had to record things. And I'm like, wow, we have selfies there.
Yeah.
You know, we have taken pictures there. We've spent time there in that area.
February 17th, 2018 was the forum that they first talked at that we went to.
Just trying to prove me wrong.
So
whatever.
Yeah, but
it is years before everybody else, and it's definitely years before this Netflix thing.
I know.
This is why we're so freaking cool, Omi. We're cool because we went. We didn't even know how cool it was.
I knew
the forum was great. There's a lot of weirdo people in that forum too, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, they've done some stuff.
Yeah,
so, but,
it was a good time.
Because that was the other thing, because the Netflix showed a lot of the San Juan River and a lot of the paranormal that goes through there, almost like a corridor.
Yeah, shocking, right?
Yeah, and the Finding Bigfoot episodes we've watched.
And there's like 4 of them.
A majority of the Finding Bigfoot episodes we've watched have focused on the Four Corners. Well, the San Juan follows one of the bottom edges of the Four Corners territory.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and then it goes...
I think Utah's not involved in that, but...
Yeah, it's weird. But I think that's because of, like...
I think it's just because of Utah not wanting to play along. But, you know, yeah.
But it goes all the way from, like... And some of the footage that they were sharing, I think, you know, one of my friends was taking me to a couple of those places. It's, like, deep in the reservation territory, but then it's also all the way out where we used to camp, like, at least once a month, you know? Yeah,
because it's weird, because you have, like, you know, reservation land mixed in with national recreation areas, so it's kind of hard to...
And land grants, which are
and
a
land
whole
grants,
nother
and
thing.
BLM land, which is Bureau of Land Management, which is basically free to use public land. But yeah, the clips that they showed when they were investigating Bigfoot sightings, it's like we know where those areas are. We've spent time there. We've had our own weird experiences. And honestly, it wasn't until after we started figuring out that some of the things that we were hearing, like, you know, baby cries in the woods and strange things like that, that it's entirely it never occurred to me, let's just put it this way, never even thought about it, that there could be Bigfoot out in New Mexico. Because we weren't wired that way at the time. When we liked the weird, spooky stuff, and we listened to Coast, and we did all that. So you're like, oh, this is great. But it just never occurred to us to actively start digging into it until we started putting 2 and 2 together and go, yeah, like, you know, the time you're at Fort Stanton and you were basically hearing all the noises and stuff, there's nobody there. That was ghost activity. And then you get Bigfoot activity. And then the idea that we've seen UFO stuff whizzing through the sky.
And then, you know...
And we're like, hey...
all of the stuff that we saw, at the time it wasn't, you know, the whole let's go out and see spooky stuff, because it wasn't that we were unawares of it. It wasn't on
we weren't looking at it. It wasn't on the radar.
It wasn't on our radar. I mean, some of the stuff, like, I had a thing where I really wanted to go out to places no other humans had recently been to. Well, you know, Greg intentionally for my birthday taking me, like, to the farthest parts of, like, civilization or the Quebradas Scenic Highway or one of the land grants.
It was the safest,
you know,
farthest place to be, because you could die, you know, being off road somewhere.
These remote areas, because I wanted to capture them with my camera, not because I was out like, oh, this is where Bigfoot's going to be. It was intentionally because there wasn't light pollution or other humans or nosy campers.
Yeah, so we could take pictures of cool stuff, nature, the stars, all of that.
And it's funny that all of those requirements for me to have that good photography and that isolated experience also basically parallel how to have a Bigfoot situation or a UFO situation.
It's funny because some of it can kind of parallels the 47th or 37th parallel.
Well, correlates as well.
Correlates,
you know,
which has some weird stuff going on. And I remember that area that we went for birthday was very nice because brother Dave made those delicious, you know, cake balls.
Yeah, and it's just
You know, call him Brother Dave instead of Father Dave this time.
Going out to the middle of nowhere so I might get that shot of an elk or, you know, a really pretty sky photo or things like that.
Yeah.
And
it just sort of morphed into...
Oh, wow, we're suddenly in, you know, Bigfoot territory or witch territory or, you know, El Moro, which is a whole thing in itself that we didn't.
Well, my favorite is we'd go to these places and hear like ceremonial music and stuff and just assume that, oh yeah, there's tribal celebration. It's like there's nobody there, stupid. You're the only ones there.
I actually
on top of a plateau. Yeah. I actually have pictures where we had to wind around it and get up there, and we finally got up there, and it was like there's nothing up here.
Yeah,
there's nobody here. You know,
I actually said that. I was like,
we're there for like 2 hours, and there's nobody.
I actually said that. I was like, either there's a festival going on, and we didn't remember, like a festival on the reservation, or somebody's up here having an illegal yoga retreat. You know?
Yeah. No, nobody up there. And we've had that experience with a couple different of those high plateaus where it's just like, well, you hear it, including like in Chaco. Like, man, they were really loud last night.
Yeah.
You guys are the only ones here.
For miles.
Yeah, we got that a couple times. Like the ranger who, you know, thought when we got there for your birthday, he was so happy when I popped out of the van.
Yeah.
At the time, it was a great white buffalo. He goes, oh, man, thank God. And I'm like, I'm kind of looking at him. He's like, he yells at us, I thought you guys were dead.
Yeah.
Cool. Thumbs up, and he drove away, right? I'm like, okay. Well, and then I thought about it. I'm like, well, he didn't even check to see if we were broke down or anything. He was just happy we were alive. Yeah. And that was the extent of his involvement because he didn't want to be responsible for whatever. But, you know, stuff like that. And but the ranger in Jemez, when we were at the hot springs and we were watching these filthy hippies down there naked in the hot spring out in nature, which is just like, well, I'm not going in there now.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really have much idea of going in there anyway because, you know, it didn't occur to me there'd be like weird, filthy, naked people in there and just randomly during the day, you know. But
I just wanted one of those like typical Instagram photos where you're soaking your feet, you know, at golden hour and the sun and the rocks and everything. But no, there's dirty hippies there. And
yeah, they probably aren't even dirty hippies, but they were filthy hippies when they were there. But yeah, he was like, I won't be here by myself. I'll never go camping here. Don't camp there anymore. You guys should be, you know, stay down here. And this guy was ex-military. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the only reason why he talked to me. We could kind of swap a little bit. We had a relationship going on. We've both been through had the same sort of, we had a commonality with some experience. And so that's when it all started getting put together. And so here come the Paranormal Rangers. We go to the thing, you know, we see it. It was great. And here it is again, 6 years later. And they were talking about some things that were really familiar to us because we had talked to them a little bit about certain things. Like a couple, just to kind of briefly sort of surmise what I remember them talking about. Window Rock is a weird area.
Yeah.
And we've heard that multiple times. Window Rock, I think, is relatively close as the crow flies to things like Skinwalker and stuff like that. Sort of, right? So that's a weird area. Paranormal Rangers are also known as like Navajo X-Files. There's been movies made about weird experiences on Navajo Res that are kind of related to some of the stories that they had. They started doing this in 2000.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Federal agents, they were trained in Georgia, recognized federal agents, right? Has its own impressive pedigree right there. They did Bigfoot research. They've done UFO research. They've done, you know, Skinwalker research, all that sort of thing. During an election, they told us that they used to run into Bob Bigelow's NIDS teams all the time. And NIDS is the National Institute for Discovery Science, and Bigelow owns Skinwalker Ranch and all that sort of thing. Fast forward to the future, and then you've got John Dover, who's part of the team. It's Stanley and John, who went to Skinwalker Ranch to talk to those guys. So he's been there.
Yeah.
And he came from Window Rock, and evidently still was. And he basically seen the Phoenix Lights at one time outside his house, and he talked about that.
Yeah.
He's talked about him missing time on the way to work. So it took him like an hour to get to work, an hour and 17 minutes or something like that. And he wound up showing up to be somewhere to have this truck have some maintenance performed on it because they put high miles on their vehicles. And he got there an hour late. And he's like, how is that possible? Like, he didn't deviate. He went straight there. And because the reason why he said he went straight there is because he had to use the bathroom. And he knew he could make it to this point to use the bathroom in this amount of time. Which is if you take a route like that every day, you know where your pee stops are, right?
Yeah, and that I was about to say, it was a part of this man's character. He's organized. He knows exactly how long things take. You know, I mean, he had his route every day down packed. So for him to lose an hour of time out of nowhere when he could account for, and he even gave us like his daily routine.
Yeah.
You know? So
he couldn't explain it. So how do you lose an hour? And you know, yeah. So there's some weirdness going on there. And then like, even when you talk about like Skinwalker and the experience that people say sometimes going down some of these dark desert roads, you know, people see things running along the side of the car, like when you're skirting the reservation. And Stanley had that experience, you know, coming back from a movie late one night. And I think the movie he seen was Maximum Overdrive. Right. Anyway, and this is like 1986 when he wasn't a Ranger then because he was still a kid. Yeah. And so he said he seen one running beside his car and he got to like 55 miles an hour and this thing is still running. So I thought that was kind of like super creepy, right?
Yeah.
You know, when they did the Bigfoot research, because they had multiple sightings, at least 30 sightings along the San Juan River, they had hair samples. They sent them in to be examined, and they came back as being unknown carnivore. You know, that's something I never heard before. I don't remember hearing it. You know, that was on the Netflix show, you know, Unsolved Mysteries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when they talked about, you know, some of the where the sightings went into the Highway 4 area, or, you know, the Highway Route 4, which is where, you know, hey, we're camping, and they're standing there doing an interview with somebody who said that, hey, we seen UFO lights, and they're talking about a correlation between seeing UFOs, having UFO sightings, and then having the appearance of seeing Bigfoot at the same time. Yeah. They made that correlation. And the area they're talking about is the area where we used to go, right? So I'm like, man, that's kind of weird. And then, you know, they went so far as to say that they think that everything is related.
Yeah.
Layers upon layers. And the idea that Bigfoot, because people say they watched Bigfoot, they've seen Bigfoot, and all of a sudden they go to where it was and it's completely gone. No more tracks, right? They just disappear. And they sort of made that correlation between portals and things like that. They
only lightly touched on like Navajo creation myth or mythology.
Right.
And the portals thing. But many of the places that are talked about in the Netflix, but it's not directly correlated, is Window Rock, big place as far as like theories of portals and shift energy. Highway 4 right along there, and then heading towards Farmington. Farmington is what, Land of 1,000 Arches, and
I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of the arches are.
That's something we could ask Dave.
Yeah, arches have a long symbolism with certain indigenous cultures as being part of portals. You know, so, and that whole Chaco area, the outlier ruins where we would go.
Yeah.
Portals. So.
Yeah, and so, you know, when we were at that presentation, somebody actually had talked about that.
Yeah.
And they actually asked, you know, because they do the point where you can like ask a question or two, right? And so they had actually brought something up about being, or they wanted to know what their opinion, what the Navajo Rangers' opinion was when it came to being around these sacred areas and having experiences.
Yeah.
And so that happens to be part of the audio that I was interested in that I recorded real quick with their permission way back when. I thought it was 2017. You say it's 2018, so you win. So we're going to play it for you. It's a couple minutes long. I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation. So here you go.
I work on the reservation, and I'm driving on the Indian service routes and dirt roads and stuff, and I get turned around, disoriented, and it's usually around where there's, like on Fluted Rock, where there's a bunch of ruins and things. Do you think some of this has something tied in with a previous culture, like the Anasazi?
It's anything's possible. We've had buttes, areas in the Loop area in Talani Lake, where if you were to go up there, orbs of light would chase you away. Like there's something about that place, and they don't want you there. And people on horseback have been just about knocked off their horses, you know, trying to avoid these things.
One of the older office buildings there in Winter Rock, Arizona, you know, they were having a lot of haunting activity in that building. But if you consider that, in our own modern history, you look at the Navajos being forced marched to Fort Sumner, and in that area of where the actual Winter Rock is, The Army had encampments there before they began marching people. There were women that were raped and girls also that were killed in that particular area. So this kind of traumatic and violence, it stains those lands in those areas. But the other thing you consider is that Winter Rock monument that's there. That's existed for millions of years, and that has drawn human activity to that location back to the time of Anasazi and beyond. And so there's been a lot of human activity in that. So yes, I think there's certain areas that have drawn human activity, and depending on what's occurred there, we come along and we build our modern buildings on these grounds and stuff, but there's been a lot of cultures and people that have lived here long before we've showed up.
Yeah, that place about Satan's Butte, I got turned around there. I spent a whole afternoon driving around.
Yeah.
And
there are places that you get into them, and maybe the existing energy there or whatever can disorient you, and
Yeah.
He mentioned Satan's Butte, which is in the Netflix series. So that person had been driving around that same area that's on the Netflix documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but see, that's just it, though. With that particular area, people report getting turned around there all the time.
Yeah. And I was wrong. It's not Farmington that's the land of the arches. It's Aztec, New Mexico.
Yeah, well, you had Farmington and Aztec both had a UFO incident, too.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, because right between Farmington and Aztec and Bloomfield is that area where there was the alleged UFO crash that was supposed to be bigger than Roswell.
Well, yeah, because it was reclaimed, and there's even evidence where they had welded things in place to be able to, they had welded, what do you call them, like a derrick, to be able to crane lift whatever this was and put it on the back of a truck, strap it up and drive away.
And then it got...
And it's still there. You allegedly can go see these pipes welded, or cemented and welded and cut off and all that stuff. So,
it was allegedly debunked, and then the land got sold off. Then some of it got turned into BLM land. But all the welding and everything you've talked about is still there.
Yeah, well, fun fact.
Yeah.
When we went to the Trinity site, which you can go to in New Mexico when they open it up once a year, maybe it used to be twice a year before COVID. I don't know if it's still the case, where you can go to White Sands and you can go where they actually tested the atomic bombs.
Yeah.
They had the same sort of cemented in pipe cutoff, where they had made, dug a hole or made a square hole, put some pipe in it, filled it with cement, right, to be able to lift a heavy object, right? It's just the same thing is there as well.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So that's a coincidence, right?
Yeah, and the thing I was going to talk about was the arches and the portals. I was actually talking about Aztec. So Aztec, New Mexico, then it goes to Farmington, then it heads into Arizona, where you hit places like Chinle and Fort Defiance, and then it dips down towards Satan's Butte and everything else, and then it almost turns into like a sea.
Yeah, because you actually run into part of...
and a majority of their cases...
just outside of San Lorenzo Canyon.
Yeah, that involve portals or UFOs form a sea. It's just... yeah, so...
Coincidence?
And if we're talking natural arches, so it was really cool when we went to listen to their talk and to see on Netflix, to hear about all these patterns that we thought, are we insane for noticing all these patterns and for being such novices at the time or relatively new to it at the time? All these things were like, yeah, we noticed that too, or we've experienced something similar. And the pattern is there. I mean, all the weirdness and high strangeness that the Navajo Rangers investigated, it fit a pattern within not just the reservation, but within these natural landmark areas.
Yep.
So the theories of portals and shifting energy and dimensions, it kind of cemented more possibility in me believing it, I guess,
Yeah, well, and the thing is that we're not the only ones.
Yeah.
Because there's people out there too. I mean, if you think about the Finding Bigfoot guys, and I just use that as a term to whatever, if they were there, they did 4 episodes because of the 4 corners and everything else. Right.
Yeah.
And then we've seen shows where they're talking about like Socorro and Aztec and, the Roswell and all these other incidents with UFOs and some of the other things. And then Area 51, but now Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. And it's like all this area, there is strangeness. New Mexico has its own flavor of high strangeness for sure. Animal mutilations and all that jazz. Right. Mm-hmm. Even now when you look at like the deep underground military bases and the alien human war that broke out when they were talking about, remember?
Yeah.
When dude went down and he was shooting monsters. And we were going to go to the conference to go see Stanton Friedman, but Stanton Friedman actually canceled because he was old. Because that's why he canceled. He's like, I canceled because I'm old. Is basically what he said.
Unfortunately, a few months later, I think he passed away.
Yeah, I think it was a while, but yeah.
And
so it's just kind of a weird thing. We seen this show, and it was like, okay, do we talk about the Paranormal Rangers? Because we've actually talked about this in 3 or 4 podcasts in the past, but then I realized, well, we've been doing the podcast for a couple of years, and not everybody has heard it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I remember, it kind of stuck out to me because of watching the recent episodes of Skinwalker Ranch, right, and basically those guys, and how it relates to Bob Bigelow, right? So the Paranormal Rangers would go and answer UFO calls. Mm-hmm. And they talk, and then in the Netflix show, there's a mention of like this lady following an orb or having an orb follower and all that stuff. But during the talk, there was another sort of information that came out where this might not be the same lady. It could be a different story, but she missed time, seen a 4-foot rabbit that was talking to her. Remember? She was being chased. Somehow or another, she wound up losing time, wound up in her driveway. There was like a 4-foot rabbit, right? And so they went to go and investigate. And they did some testing because they would take a compass and run it around a car. And they showed this during the special too, right? It's something when they talked about during their presentation, and come up with high levels of magnetism. They would also look at radiation and things like that.
They did the radiation reading by her window.
Right. And it came up with something, and the idea was that she got zapped with something. But in the talk, they said Bob Bigelow's team showed up, NIDS.
Yeah.
And did a thorough investigation as well. And those guys didn't really share any information or anything like that. They would come in the white suits and do all that stuff.
It was also like, who called them?
Yeah. And then, exactly. And then they would leave. And then one of the reports they had where somebody had said that, they'd seen UFOs and stuff, and they seen some creatures that were coming towards their house. Mm-hmm. And I have a little bit of audio clip on that. So I'll play that for you real quick because I thought this was really interesting and kind of creeped me out a little bit. You ready?
Mm-hmm. But he said when these things were coming close to the home, that there was no sound. And it was
It's like they were gliding.
Ooh. So imagine you're in the desert. It's already dark to begin with, and there's not a lot of trees and all that stuff, depending on where you're at. And you look over, you've seen some UFO lights, and all of a sudden you see creatures gliding towards your house. What are you going to do? Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, call the cops. They'll be there in 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
So, and also during the talk, they had talked about some other things and had other more detailed accounts, especially with skinwalkers, and somebody got poisoned by a skinwalker.
That's what it was. Shiprock. That's the other place.
Yeah, Shiprock, yeah.
Because that forms that sea as well that I've been talking about.
Kind of.
Yeah. If you start at Bloomfield, it turns into it. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So
anyway, so we figured we'd kind of recount some of the stuff that we remember in the presentation at the New Mexico UFO Paranormal Forum, right?
Yeah.
And some of the stuff I remember, we actually took pictures too. We got like pictures of all their swag and some of their investigation equipment. And one of the things, before we kind of wrap up talking about them, one of the things I thought was really interesting is that they both sort of made mention that since they, kind of grew up outside of the reservation, outside of Arizona, one grew up in Oklahoma, one kind of grew up in Los Angeles, and they eventually went to become, Rangers for Navajo Nation. That they didn't grow up with all the traditions and all the sort of nuanced that comes with doing this sort of thing. So they didn't have problems talking about it because they said that, a lot of the rangers wouldn't go investigate things like that because you don't do that. You don't mess with it. You don't talk about it. You leave it alone. You stay away from it.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't have the same sort of upbringing when it comes to traditions and things like that.
Yeah.
And staying away from it. So they were perfect for the job. Right.
Yeah.
And they said, we didn't worry about things like protection on the job until they started doing this. And they weren't talking about like bulletproof vests and stuff. They're talking about, let me go ahead and carry a big solid silver cross, holy water, cedar sage, white sage, objects to protect them against, weird energies and forces and all that sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
And, they sage before. And one of the things that he told us, I think it was Jonathan told us when we were talking to him after the presentation, because I asked him about some of that stuff, is like, they saged in the parking lot before they went in there.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to get any of the weird energy attached to them. And that's what he said. We don't want no weirdo energy. So we saged before we came here, and we go out in the parking lot again, we'll sage again. And they were serious business about it. And he was saying that some of these objects are haunted on the table. So these objects, you could bring something home with you. So do not touch. And I kept trying to touch. And he's like, do not touch.
And then when we started doing paranormal investigations, we picked up on that good habit.
Oh, yeah. Sage before, sage early, sage often, right?
And it's funny because you're talking about, like, they didn't grow up with those nuances and things like that. However, once they got into the investigating, they picked up those practices. And I want to say it's very true. The rangers that were on staff that grew up in Navajo culture, and, it was in how they were raised, it varies differently than like what you see on there's that really good TV show on right now, Dark Winds, with Zon McLaren or Zach McLaren. He's on Res Dogs.
Yeah. He was also on
But that Dark Winds show, they had to go investigate a witch. And they showed them saging beforehand and saging after. When in reality, you get a call out to a witch, you have like half the department saying, I'm not going.
Yeah.
No. It's not like funny like it was on the TV show or amusing.
Yeah, no, they take it seriously.
It's just like, no, I'm not going out.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to me. I'm not going to impugn anybody's native stuff scares me, because it's like, ooh, that's scary. So it was great. I mean, we got a chance to see him and talk to him and learn a little bit from him a long time ago. Here they are back again, right, with this Netflix special. Then we have like terrible comment that this one person left. He got 6 well-deserved thumbs down. But then I noticed that, all over the place, people were like talking about the Paranormal Rangers. And it's like, yeah, these guys, I think, have their own level of authenticity that goes beyond what a lot of people do. They don't even have any real social media presence at all. Like, they're not up there.
Yeah.
Check our Facebook page, right? I mean, their email address still has like, it's weird. It's like Paranormal Ranger 55612@gmail.com. There's no website for those guys.
Yeah.
They don't have any of that stuff. There's no Facebook page. There's no Instagram, none of that. Like, nope. IMDb actually had more information about some of the stuff that they had done in other places, because I was going to put a link to all their social,
Yeah.
because why not? We talked about them for 40 minutes or whatever it's been. And I remember that when we talked about him in the past, I couldn't find anything for him either. But John Dover, right, who's retired, he's the lieutenant. I mean, he's done Alien Highway, Ancient Aliens for 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, he did 3 episodes on that. Unsolved Mysteries is the 1 episode. So they've been out doing some stuff, and I know he's done some other stuff too about Bigfoot, which I haven't seen yet, and I can't remember what the name of it is. But his partner, Stanley, has done nothing, according to IMDb, has done nothing but this, recent episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Stanley Milford Jr. Yeah. And the funny thing is, according to IMDb, he's retired as well, but according to Netflix special, he's no longer with that department. So I don't know what that means. So, but yeah, they got the authenticity, they got the integrity, they got the pedigree that comes from. I have no reason to, be less skeptical than I'm usually skeptical when it comes to these guys. I thought it was pretty good to be able to see that and relate to it.
Yeah.
And so we'll post some pictures that we have on the internets.
Are you looking to start a podcast? Then see this episode's show notes for our unique promo code to get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn when you sign up for a new account. Get your show on Apple and Spotify. Get helpful audience building stats and all the support you need to sound your best. They can even do video. Bring your podcast to life and have your voice heard here, there, and everywhere with Libsyn. Again, see our show notes for our unique Libsyn promo code and get podcasting.
There you go. Okay, so anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the Paranormal Rangers.
Yeah.
We figured we'd go ahead and play our commercial because we use Libsyn to do our podcast, and they're like, hey, you can give your people who listen, if they are interested in creating a podcast, a discount. And I'm all about discounts. I enjoy discounts. Discounts are delicious.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so next up in the podcast, this is something that we've been thinking about for a minute.
So we've kind of turned it into almost a theory of sorts.
Yes.
And
Let me do a disclaimer real quick.
yeah.
Okay, so before I said that murder podcasts are not my thing. Okay, if you've been listening, right, 40 plus minutes ago, I alluded to the fact that I'm not really a murder podcast, and I'm not, and that's not what this is yet. But it could be. So that's my disclaimer.
Now, it's funny because it seems like every couple of months we get a rash of unusual headlines. And finally, this summer we decided we probably need to start keeping track of these in our own convoluted way. So we have. Now, the headlines lead up to this, and that's basically starting in 2020 and through 2022. Many sections and destinations along the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Smoky Mountains have been closed for maintenance, repairs, or safety updates. Now, in our last episode, we were talking about bears. Like suddenly
Yes.
we have sections of the Smoky Mountains and part of the Blue Ridge Parkway closed due to increased bear activity.
Yeah, and just to kind of give you an idea what we're talking about, if you've never really listened to the podcast before, where we are currently broadcasting from in our underground bunker in an undisclosed location in western North Carolina. The Blue Ridge Parkway, Smoky Mountains, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, all of that stuff is the areas in which we go to.
Yeah.
Because it's close enough. We're, it's so far away, right? Even when it's close because of the mountains and stuff. But,
Yeah.
and we go here all the time. And the Brown Mountain Lights are on the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Thomas Divide lights.
Thomas Divide, and I'm still working on that video.
Yeah.
You just reminded me I need to work on that video where we had weird experiences there. But basically, we're sort of familiar with this area, the Masonic Marker, the deep underground military bases, allegedly in Linville Gorge and Paris, and all of that stuff sort of happens in these areas of which we are currently are.
Cherokee Spearfinger, Catawba Little People, just all these different weird phenomenon. Well, we noticed it seemed very, very convenient that, yes, in 2020, for some reason, large sections of the Blue Ridge Parkway were closed. Now, all of us weren't supposed to be going outside, but still, they were closing very interesting sections of the parkway in Smoky Mountains for alleged maintenance or because they didn't have staff able to man or patrol those areas, they would close them for safety purposes. Like, I remember clearly, since everybody was supposed to keep to themselves, we were going to go do more Linville Gorge, Brown Mountain Lights investigations, only to find that the easiest route for most vehicles had been closed. And there were signs up everywhere saying, closed to simple traffic. That was the terminology that was used.
Yeah, and these areas don't provide services, so there wasn't a staffing issue because there's never really any staff there ever.
Yeah. Now, on top of Wiseman's View and certain areas of Linville Gorge being closed.
Like Upper and Lower Linville Falls.
Yeah, there were sections of the Blue Ridge Parkway that people love to go on that were closed, but then there were sections that nobody really goes to that were also closed.
Yeah.
And they'd be closed for like extended periods of time. Yeah. Now, it was weird because we all thought, oh, well, it's because it's, this year, 2020, this will all be over with in 2021. No. Because we started hitting up Tennessee in 2021, and we were finding the same thing. Some of these sections were being closed or had been actively still closed.
Yeah, and the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is one of the most visited parks in the U.S., period. It's
Yeah.
not the Grand Canyon like you think it would be. It's that
this
area.
place.
Which is all connected.
Yeah.
And, the funny thing about the Blue Ridge Parkway and how it's all connected, it's all part of Appalachia.
Yeah.
So when you hear people talk about it, Appalachia is not just in Kentucky, and it certainly just isn't in Ohio or West Virginia. It kind of covers
It's
a lot.
It's
Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, part of South Carolina, all of that.
Yeah, it's like the spine of part of Virginia and North Carolina.
Right.
So,
and it's pretty heavily concentrated, and these woods are weird
yeah.
and creepy and off-putting in some strange ways. But we started thinking,
Yeah.
it's like you never see numbers. Because so if you go somewhere where it's weird and spooky and you have a high volume of people, there's bound to be incidents.
Or Google information.
Yeah. And it's like, we started talking one day. We were brainstorming ideas for the podcast as we were going through these windy, twisty roads in a van, which is kind of sketchy. And we were thinking about things like, death in the Smokies. Because these murder podcasts and stuff like that, like Murder on the Parkway, these terrible idea, sort of podcasts. And we realized we don't really like murder podcasts. We wouldn't really be good at making one. So just out of curiosity, Omi is an excellent researcher. She's quick and she's like, I can't find anything. I'm like, that's impossible.
And let me say that around this time period, one of my Facebook friends had just got done hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a big, long trail out west. Just as hard as the Appalachian Trail. And if you search for murders, disappearances, and crime on the Pacific Trail, you get results. But if you search for murders, disappearances on Appalachian Trail
or Blue Ridge Parkway,
you got to dig.
Yeah.
You really do. And that really kind of messed me up, especially when we're now in 2022 and I have 3 different waterfalls or known trails near us that are closed, and one of them is going to be closed all the way until 2023.
Yeah. Why?
Now, the reason on paper is safety concerns. Some of them, it's like physical safety while hiking, like the area is too dangerous to hike now, or there's like environmental factors like falling rock or whatever. But I've hiked one of these. I don't see that much danger that they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because occasionally in our comments on our YouTube channel, because we do have a YouTube channel as well for Creep Geeks where we put the podcast episode, we get comments like, hey, there's a dog man, like on Tom's Creek.
Yeah.
And, oh, hey, there's Bigfoots out there, and hey, there's this, and hey, there's that. And we have been talking about feral people in the parks, like maybe some of the sightings that people are actually seeing for Bigfoots and things like that aren't really Bigfoots and things like that, but they're really just grubby feral people, if that's a possibility. But with not having any real information of how many people have gone missing or disappeared or
passed
got
away,
killed on the parkway or close to the parkway, you started digging a little harder and you came up with a number from 2020.
Yeah.
And remember, 2020, we were locked down.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was kind of locked down. You had things like broken necks and stuff going around. But what was the number you came up with?
So this number is only for the miles of the Blue Ridge Parkway that go from Shenandoah National Park through Asheville and ending abruptly at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park entrance.
So basically, from the edge of Virginia to the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Yes. And that number is, up into the point of this article, 13 fatalities that have been confirmed.
Yeah, confirmed.
And that includes car crashes, suicides, and medical incidents. However, it does not include these 2 open missing cases that I have on my screen.
Yeah. And I'm sure it doesn't include cases that go missing where people don't actually make a big enough stink about it to get it reported or measured
We have two
or
different
accounted for in some way.
We have two different people here in McDowell who went hiking and camping in 2020, and they disappeared. We still have people looking for them.
And they're not on that list.
They're not on this list.
So the thought is, there's something weird going on. Like, why aren't we, and this is not like missing 411, where you're like, oh, Bigfoot came and got him, or a UFO dropped a Bigfoot and a Bigfoot. You know, it's none of that. It's why aren't we hearing about this sort of thing? So we're going to start digging.
Yeah.
And that's why part of this podcast is actually called Death in the Smokies. Right?
Yeah.
Because if it's 13 in 2020, 2 years has passed. It's got to be 20, it's got to be more than that. 22 people, 30 people.
And there's some threads out there on the internet that I'm still trying to dig up that claim it's upwards of like 24 people last year.
Yeah. Well, we heard 22, but we
Yeah.
can't verify it.
Yeah. And that's just in like user group threads and places like that.
Right.
But my concern is, rather than, I hate to say it, where there's certain places that want to appropriate a profile onto the missing people, I think the profile should be applied to the area.
Right.
So why don't we profile the area that is Appalachia, Blue Ridge Parkway, Great Smoky Mountains? Take a deeper look at that instead of, because like we just had somebody, unfortunately, his body was just found a couple weeks ago, or actually last month, and it was another out of the blue, unusual disappearance.
Right.
And that person does not match the profile of somebody I know of here in McDowell who's totally different person, different personality, different age range, different job, that sort of thing. Those two people, they can't fit the same profile.
Right. So they don't have the same demographics. They don't have this. And see, that's part of it. And I think I think the idea that with national parks in general, and that a lot of information doesn't come out, because if you had, like, when we talked about missing 411 years ago, 4 years ago, right? 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Whatever it was like, we've been doing a podcast for a minute. So it was about 3 years ago. We came up with a number of like 4,096 missing people across the national parks.
Yeah.
In 1 year. And we had to dig for it. It's not like it's common news. It's not like it's common information. And the idea that, okay, so if you heard that 4,000 people were missing or killed or whatever in our national parks, would you go?
No.
No. You know why? It's dangerous. There's like, and we're not talking about necessarily where people do stupid stuff like, let me run up on this bison and try to take its picture. And this thing's flipping you across the road because you wouldn't run up on a wild animal. But a lot of these, missing sort of scary circumstance, it doesn't make sense. So when we started thinking about our own area and where we are, and we're in a sketchy area when it comes to the national park, sketchy as in it's not wide open, it's mountains, and it's, it just seems a little weird.
So
to not be able to find that information readily.
Just to compare national parks, granted, this is going to be hard, but I'm comparing by number of people and visitors, right? So that number we had come up with, 4,600-ish, right?
Yeah, something like that. I said 4,096, but the number varies.
Yeah. So in 2020 so far, the entire state of New York, because I'm going by population, millions of people visit national parks, millions of people visit New York. The state of New York has a total of 606 missing people right now. 606. And that averages to just under a little bit less than 3 people per 100,000 visitors or people living in New York. Whereas the national parks, it's a couple million visit annually. And it's thousands of people. That's mind-blowing,
Yeah.
So New York, which is a very busy place, has good places and bad places and, problematic places. It's only got 606 people missing.
Right. And so we're kind of curious as to find out, if we can, exactly how many people go missing in this area in which we currently habitate and go to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus anything else, because I think the idea that death in the Smokies, there's something to it.
Yeah.
And there's places that we go where we're not going off the beaten path whatsoever because it's just so freaking weird.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's off-putting. It's like so dense, ancient forest out this way, ancient mountain. And the energy is awful. So
there's new articles now saying the average, according to like Trails and Summit or Examiner, 1,600 individuals mysteriously vanish each year in national parks.
that's reported.
Yeah.
And the number we came up with, 4,096, was a number that basically came from taking different park information that could be found
Now,
and then adding them together.
and then this thing has the nerve to say which national park has the most disappearances. It's claiming Grand Canyon. And yeah, Grand Canyon and Yosemite National Park statistics.
And see, that's what you would think, right? Grand Canyon it's a vast thing. You can fall into whatever, right? And then Yosemite, and I'm sure even Yellowstone's in there somewhere too.
Yeah.
Because those are you have the public deaths that happen there. Like I said, with tangling with wildlife or just accidents and that kind of thing. But it doesn't work. Because, I mean, if you think about the size, let's look at the size of the park and the concentration of the people that visit the Smoky Mountains in general. If we basically include Shenandoah into the Smoky Mountains, that number is inordinately high. It's a disproportionate number. Because you can't even find how many people go missing in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And that park's not that big. I mean, it's not. We go through it all the time when we go to like Gatlinburg, and we've been there many times.
Yeah.
So why is there no information on that? And you might say, okay, well, the way it falls into Tennessee and things like that, it's highly populated, I shouldn't say populated. It is a highly packed tourist area certain times of the year.
Like I said, kind of like New York, it's highly trafficked.
Yes, well, it is, but only certain times of the year. There's a lot of times where there's none of that because tourists aren't there.
See,
because who wants to go through this stuff in the wintertime where it's all icy and scary, right?
Yeah. And I'm seeing all these they're breaking up the Blue Ridge Parkway by state, which just further muddies the numbers. Because I'm seeing upwards of 400 for Tennessee, but then I'm only seeing 3 for Great Smoky Mountains.
Right. And we just, in our last podcast, talked about Great Smoky Mountains National Park and having bears and having sections closed from bears. Camper getting mauled in a cabin.
And there's 2
people
active
getting mauled cases. In tents.
Yeah.
And there's 2 active cases that you were talking. So the numbers don't make sense. Yeah. So anyway, to kind of go through and sort of wrap up the podcast, we will be talking about death in the Smokies and trying to figure out an accurate, actual number of the people that go missing.
Yeah.
Or whatever in our parks. Because I got to tell you, man, there's something going on. Because how can we in the news and local news see more missing than what's actually reported? See, it doesn't make sense. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to talk about. And we're going to dig into it and do a little research with it and sort of see what we can find. So meanwhile, if you've heard of anything weird going on in the Smokies or on the Blue Ridge Parkway and you're listening to our podcast somewhat locally and you'd like to share, or you're a patron who may know some stuff and you know who you are, you should give us a heads up, let us know. And everything we talk about in our CreepGeeks podcast is in our show notes. Yeah. So if you go to the website, you'll see all the links and stuff that we refer to in some of the stories and things that we talk about. We'll have links to take you there to the appropriate places, just like all the music is, counted for as well with licenses and all that good stuff. So anyway, we're going to roll into that and sort of keep our eye on it and see what we come up with. And if that means going to visit some of these places to sort of get an idea, then we will.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this kind of came across, just kind of give you an idea. When we were out in New Mexico, we started realizing that there was a lot of people that died in parks out there. Like, you went off the road, like in Arizona, right? That elderly couple, they weren't even that elderly, drove off the road. They made one wrong turn and drove, it was a stupid number, like 500 yards off the main road and died of exposure.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can that happen?
Or that family, wherever they died in White Sands.
They went off the main path.
By like
a quarter of a mile.
Yeah.
And died. They were from France. Yeah. The only one that survived was their kid.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. So we started looking at things like that and ways to be safe and secure. And then so we're here and it's a little bit different. And we kind of want to keep an eye on it. So I think at this point, we're going to take a second to go ahead and wrap up the podcast. And we do appreciate you listening and sticking with us.
Oh,
You're just sitting there looking at me. What's he doing?
I thought you were telling me something. It turns
Yeah,
out
I was telling you to wrap us up.
It turns
Our
out
dog
Pepper's telling me something.
She's down there underneath the table going, "Hey guys,
Well,
I would really like to use the bathroom,
I know.
guys."
So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Check us out on TikTok. We are trying to get our TikTok to grow, so please join us over there on TikTok. You can find links to all our social media in the show notes for every podcast episode. But pretty much Creep Geeks Pod or Creep Geeks Podcast, you are going to find us on every social media platform. In addition, Crafty Intent on Etsy is carrying Creep Geeks swag and Creep Geeks merchandise. Crafty Intent on Etsy is where you're going to go if you'd like one of our Paranormal Investigator stickers or some of our unique stuff that we've come out with. So if you don't see us at a convention, you can always pop onto Etsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, there you go. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the podcast. And if you are one of our patrons, we very much appreciate your support. And we're putting out new stuff for you guys real soon. So anyway, see you later. Take it easy. Bye, Sickle.
Bye.
Jesus, come briefly, dismiss me or keep me, just let me go home. She'll be burning a candle under the mantle when the evenings get cold. She knows that I'll grow slowly as a raindrop down her window pane. She knows that I'll hold her locket on a chain to keep the evil things away. She knows that I'll hold slowly as a raindrop down her window pane. She knows that I'll hold her locket on a chain to keep the evil things away.